72% of you that voted on my poll this morning said it is not cool for a random stranger to try to pet your dog. Almost 3,500 of you voted, suggesting that this is quite a hot topic. But it gets even more complicated than that. What if this dog of yours were to bite the stranger when the stranger's trying to stroke them uninvited? So welcome back, but if you're new to me, I'm a barrister who helps you understand law. And in this video, a very interesting topic about what happens and whose responsibility it is and what kind of response you can expect if your dog were to bite somebody. Because just in 2019, a postie lost a finger to a Staffordshire Bull Terrier through the letterbox whilst posting mail. The owner of the dog tried to claim that the postman was trespassing by putting his hand through the letterbox in her defence. However, the court didn't buy this and found her guilty of having the dog dangerously out of control. This might sound very unfair to many of you because the dog was in its own home and the postman was putting his hand through the letterbox. However, the problem is this: the owner knew that the dog was aggressive and would be aggressive every time the postman tried to put letters through the box. And the same is true if you are out and about in public as well. A dog can be dangerously out of control, whether on or off lead. So if you know that your dog is aggressive, even if your dog is on a lead and a stranger comes across and pets uninvitedly, if your dog were to bite said random stranger, you may well be prosecuted for having your dog dangerously out of control. But lucky for you, because you watch the Black Belt Barrister channel, I'm going to give you guidance, not advice, on how to avoid being prosecuted if this happens to you. So keep watching. Starting with the basic requirements. It is a legal requirement that all dogs have a collar. This is under the Control of Dogs Order of 1992, which states that, subject to some very narrow exceptions, any dog in a public place must wear a collar with at least the name and address of the owner engraved or written or somehow contained on it. It's also a criminal offence under the Road Traffic Act of 1988 to have a dog out on a public road without being on a lead, and you can again be fined for such an offence. Although some dogs, such as guide dogs, dogs of the armed forces, HM Customs and the police and so on, are exempt from wearing a collar and a tag, but as I say, those are narrow exceptions. However, when it comes to the dangerousness of dogs and whether dogs are dangerously out of control, this is all governed under the Dangerous Dogs Act of 1991, which doesn't, as some people think it does, just apply to certain breeds of dogs. This actually applies to all dogs if they are deemed to be dangerously out of control. Under Section 3.1 of the 1991 Act, which has been amended by the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act of 2014, which made many amendments to many different bits of legislation, if any dog is dangerously out of control in any place, including private property, which includes the case where the postie lost his finger, the owner or the person at the time being in charge of that dog is guilty of a summary offence. And that becomes an aggravated offence and triable either way if the dog injures any person or an assistance dog whilst dangerously out of control. And the dog is to be regarded as being dangerously out of control on any occasion where there's grounds for reasonable apprehension, so someone else can fear injury of that dog. So this might be the case even if your dog is, let's say, perfectly tame and safe and cuddly. If the dog is out of control to the extent that there are grounds for someone to have a reasonable apprehension of injury to them or their assistance dog, whether or not it actually does go on to injure them, that's under Section 10.3 of the Dangerous Dogs Act 1991, this might still be a dangerously out of control dog for the purposes of the legislation. However, there's some very interesting legal guidance from the High Court of Northern Ireland from 2008 on such a case involving a dog, specifically involving the defence of valenti, or valenti non fit injuria, which essentially means when a person has willingly placed themselves in risk of danger, it is a complete defence to the other person because the person injured could foresee that danger. However, in this case in the High Court in Northern Ireland, the court said at paragraph 7 that this maxim can only apply in circumstances where the person injured has foreseen the danger. In this case, the court said there's no evidence that the plaintiff in this case perceived any risk from the dog. So, translating that to our situation here, If you wanted to ensure that any other person was volunteering themselves to a known risk of being bitten by your dog, if you simply flag up that the dog might bite, even if the dog doesn't, which sounds kind of harsh, but even if the dog doesn't bite ordinarily, if there's any risk that the dog might bite, which, let's face it, there is always a risk that the dog can bite because the dog has teeth, and if the dog is startled or somehow trying to protect you or senses some kind of danger from this stranger and bites for the first time, after all, every dog will bite for the first time, if you were to warn said stranger uninvitedly trying to stroke your dog, if you were to warn them that the dog might bite, and then they continue to try and stroke your dog despite the fact that you've warned them not to, and then the dog bites, then you would likely have a defence which is a complete defence of volenti non fit injuria, where they've willingly accepted the risk of being bitten and carried on anyway. Not to mention that stroking your dog without your permission is technically trespass, because at the moment at least, animals are technically property. There's a lot of discussion to have over that as to whether animals should have their own rights and identity and not just simply property, but at the moment that's how it is. If they touch your dog without permission, it's technically trespass. But as to the risk of injury, your dog can be dangerously out of control, even on a lead, if it is known that they might cause an injury. And even in narrow circumstances, it is known that the dog might cause an injury even if they've never caused an injury before. So my guidance to you would be that even if you don't think the dog is dangerous and you don't think the dog is going to bite or cause any injury, I would be warning said stranger, please don't touch, the dog might bite. Because even if the dog has never bitten before, there's a possibility they will do so, and obviously if they do get bitten and they've been warned about it, you would likely have a very valid defence, which is a complete defence of volenti. And I would be referencing that case from the High Court in Northern Ireland, which I'll put in the description below. Now, although this was in Northern Ireland, not England and Wales, there is possibly another case for England and Wales, but these cases, even if they are out of the jurisdiction, it's still a common law decision. You can still refer to it as being influential, even if there wasn't an exact case with those details in England and Wales, or indeed internationally in other jurisdictions. Quite often, as all of you law students will know, when you are writing up legal doctrines, the rule of law, and so on and so forth, we do very often refer to other courts in other jurisdictions because they are influential on our own legal system. Not necessarily binding, but they are always influential. So I thought that was an interesting poll because the vast majority of you said it is not cool for a stranger to come and pet or stroke your dog without your permission. Over almost 3,500 of you have voted so far. I found that very interesting. And just picking up on some of your comments from that poll, Dave said it depends on the context. There's lots of non-verbal signals that suggest whether the person approaching wants to pet the dog or if the owner just doesn't want you to. I would agree. If I was the owner and I'm sort of looking and walking away, that would suggest, please don't come and touch my dog. Dave goes on to say someone approaching the dog saying, oh, what a cutie, kind of suggests that they're coming in for a pet. If you don't say anything, that suggests non-verbal consent for them to pet the dog. Yes, potentially, not necessarily a strict acceptance, but one would infer the same. Dave goes on to say, I haven't seen many ninjas popping up out of the shadows, petting your dog and then disappearing in a puff of smoke. That's why I find that quite interesting. Mark, interestingly, says it depends very much on the temperament of the dog, which goes along with what I've said. Most often my dog will basically ask people to pat her without any intervention from me. She'll make eye contact, then wag her tail, shuffle up if she thinks that she might want to pat her. She's generally a very good judge of who wants to pat her and will only approach people who reciprocate eye contact and smile. The difficulty there, of course, is if in the freak situation where the dog turns around and bites somebody and there's no warning and no perception of danger, you risk being prosecuted for having a dog dangerously out of control. However unfair that might seem, I can pretty much guarantee if someone gets bitten by your dog, they're going to be looking to sue you or even report you to the police to get you prosecuted for a dangerous dog. Of course, not everybody's going to do that, but it is certainly a possibility, and certainly somebody will do that if you're unlucky with who's doing it. So I will also put the link to this community post in the description below because there's lots of interesting comments there. Please do also leave your comments and thoughts in the comment box below this video. Please do remember to like this video and share it. I love to share these discussions with you, and I want to grow my channel, and I'm really grateful for all of you that subscribe and share my videos. So with that, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.